Was there? Anyone willing to throw in some of the things that you said? Was some of them easy to rule out, other ones harder? What did you reckon? You look like...
We said gadgets are probably quite easy to get rid of, but then again that includes your mobile phone, which keeps you in contact with everyone.
So someone would connect to another, yeah. Would you still have friends if you didn't have your gadget? Yeah, thank you. Any other?
We were kind of on the friend. We thought friends was one that we would probably want to keep.
So friends is the, it's the right answer. That's you'll say that we talked about what's replaceable. So some things on that list you could replace using the other ones. Could you actually replace your qualifications if they were all taken from you? Actually, there's quite a lot of effort and hours in that. Yeah, it's a way of asking what's most important to you, and we began flipping it towards what would count for you as a successful life. If you got to the end of your life and you had loads of friends but no qualifications, no money, would that be a successful life? What about the other way around? If you swap it, loads of money, no friends, what would count as success? And obviously, I guess that will be different around the room. My guess is that in this room, people are probably above averagely successful and above averagely interested in success. I think in one sense that's just because you're at a good uni, you're studying good courses, you'll have needed to get good grades to get here. So at one level you're the successful people. There's, I guess, your mum enjoys telling people where you study and what you study. That would be my guess. I think also because most people here will be studying a caring profession in one way or the other, it's easy to see how success here translates into good things for society. I was chatting to someone yesterday who said that because he's a medical student and he knew a certain piece of information, he was able to make a significant difference in the life of someone that he cared about. Their health, their quality of life improved massively just because he'd been revising and went, this. And that made a big difference. That's quite fun, isn't it? I studied history, and no point did that happen. That was never a real thing. And people I've known have been at Guy's. Think of one guy who is desperately trying to get out of medicine so that he can be into his invention, which is a kind of robot that will deliver drugs inside the body. And if that ever works, that will make a significant difference. Someone who was here yesterday, her research is potentially going to put an end to Alzheimer's. That would be a significant thing. In my family, that would be a significant thing if that works. On your tables, you've got on your chairs, you've got a piece of white paper that looks like this. If you pick that up, it's a challenging account of when Jesus met someone and what Jesus said. But before we dive into it, I want to say Jesus is not anti-success. This isn't, I don't know if you expected that from Christians today, a kind of success, no, is the kind of the Christian position. Christianity isn't anti-success, but Jesus today wants to ask quite hard questions about what your life is really all about and whether you're sure that you've got that right. So I'm going to get Ethan to read it in just a second. I didn't warn him about that. Is that okay? But let me just give you the background before we do. It starts with a man in a crowd who tries to use Jesus to settle a family quarrel. Teacher, tell my brother to divide the inheritance with me. And already that is a pretty ugly thing, isn't it? So there's someone who is choosing money over family. Friends, if you think, actually, would you rather have a good relationship with your brother or would you rather have 10 grand? This guy's choosing 10 grand and he's trying to get Jesus in a kind of public forum. Will you settle that one for me so I go home with 10 grand and not with my brother? And Jesus refuses. Verse 14, he refuses to be judge or arbiter. And then he tells a little story. And you can tell from the way it's set up, it's going to be a story with teeth about the kind of things that people live for. And the really important phrases in it come either side. One in verse 15, one in verse 21 at the end. And that's what we're going to look at. So Ethan, could you stand up and read from verse 15 to the end for us? Thank you.
15 to the end, yeah. Then he said to them, "Watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in an abundance of possessions." And he told them this parable. The ground of a certain rich man yielded an abundant harvest. He thought to himself, "What shall I do? I have no place to store my crops." Then he said, "This is what I'll do. I will tear down my barns and build bigger ones, and there I will store my surplus grain. And I'll say to myself, you have plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy, eat, drink, and be merry." But God said to him, "You fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. Then who will get what you have prepared for yourself? This is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves, but is not rich toward God."
Hey, thank you. I don't know if you see the sting in it. I guess centrally, the point is you can be so busy chasing success that you never think what that is for. You're so busy chasing after the next thing that will make you successful that you never think what it would mean if you got the thing you're chasing after. And I guess, particularly maybe on longer degrees as well, you stay in the kind of conveyor belt for longer. The exams, the grades, the uni, the grades, the qualification, without ever the pausing to think, what is it actually about? What will it mean once I am the qualified, whatever it is? John D. Rockefeller, who was the richest person in the 20th century, was asked, how much money does it take to be really satisfied? And he said, just a little bit more. Quite clever. I think, as in actually, we run, we get there, and we still want to run to get more. And the guy in the story here, you can see he gets what he wants, his whole life goals. He's a farmer, and I'm guessing most of you not from a farming background. He's a farmer, I'm from a farming background. Big harvest, verse 16, big problem. His barns are too small. I grew up playing in barns as a kid, jumping from hay bale to hay bale, they're enormous. So the idea of it being full, that is a happy year for a farmer. Verse 18, he's got a good plan. This is sustainable, this is employment for the neighbouring village, isn't it? This is a good thing to do. Bigger barns, this is development. Store the surplus grain. Verse 19, happy outcome. He's got what he wants. But Jesus says that he is a fool. Verse 20, you fool, because that night he's going to die. So I've only got 2 points, one out of verse 15, which is to say that life is more than success. So the story is focused on money. I think you could do it with any issue though. Jesus said, watch out, be on your guard against all kinds of greed. Life does not consist in the abundance of possessions. You could get everything you want in life, but that might not really be what life is all about. It's a 2,000-year-old story, but I think it's a very, very modern mistake. As a teenager, I think for me, academic qualifications were very important to me. I think of the 5 things, I'd have said friends, but I think actually, thinking about it, to leave the room, with 2 E's in my GCSEs and nothing else, would actually in some ways have been more painful. For me, it was about getting the right qualifications, the right awards, getting to the right uni, getting on from there. And you can run your life around that, can't you? You can arrive at uni and make your first year all about telling everyone what A-levels you got. You can, after each piece of work, you can make it all about how well did I do. And I guess the things keep going. You guys have to, it's worse, isn't it? The doctors have to publish stuff. We never had to do that. You have to get onto the right placement stuff, the right, when you get to choose F1, F2, the right everything is on and on and on it goes. And people say things, don't they, like, what are you worth? When they mean, again, it's up the road to a city where the church I work for is, we're right in the middle of all those shiny towers. What are you worth? And they mean, how much money do you have? Question, is that your life? Your grades, your success, what your friends think of you, the money in the bank, is that your life? And notice, our guy in the story is not actually so stupid as to think his turnips, or whatever it is he's growing, he's not so stupid as to think that is his life. His plan is in verse 19. His plan is to take life easy and eat, drink, and be merry. It's not that he's into bad things. It's not that farming is bad. It's not that eating and drinking and taking life easy is bad. The problem is he's a fool because he's forgotten that he's going to die. He thinks he is indestructible. Now, I don't mean to be too gloomy and miserable on a rainy Wednesday lunchtime. I don't actually think this is very depressing, really. I think it's realistic. If you can work out the fact that you are going to die, and you have who knows how many years till that happens, And if you can work out what life is all about, then being realistic about that is life-enhancing, freedom-giving. Otherwise, you're left trying to hide from it. And I guess, again, in a room with quite a few medical professionals, you are confronted with death more often than most people. Most people hide from death. But even in hospitals, I remember listening to a chaplain, actually, someone in my kind of job on the radio, saying that the nurses and the doctors, when they rang her to come and sit by someone who was dying, they couldn't bring themselves to use the word death. So they'd ring her and say, we need you to come in straight away because Jimmy is very unwell. And so when it's midnight, I'm staying in bed, thanks very much, he's very unwell, I'll see him tomorrow. No, he's very unwell. We hide from death, we don't like to think about it. I remember seeing a headline in Time magazine saying in 2045, by 2045, that'll be the year we become immortal. It's a great headline. And again, maybe your research, maybe you think your work will get us there. I'm inclined to be more sceptical. I think we see advances and we think it's never going to happen. The reason I was particularly sceptical about that headline was where I was reading it was in the ITU waiting room, as my uncle was in the room next door dying. And actually more realistic to think that we have this life now and it is going to head somewhere in death. And is the success that you're living for, is it enough that it will be your life? I want to suggest Jesus thinks you are too wonderful for that. You're too amazing as a human being for anything that you could do in the next 40 years to count as your life. Any of those things, the money, the friends, I guess gadgets, we know that your life might be more than that, made by God to be more amazing than that. Very few people are properly consistent atheists in the sense that they think this life is just accident and chance. When I die, I'll rot, and that is fine, and that is all okay. Here's a test of whether you're really happy with that. A couple of people have heard me ask this question before, but how many people here can name one of their great-grandparents? I want the first name of a great-grandparent. Okay, let's just have a few. Can we have a name? William, okay, that's quite a sensible name. George, okay, these are good sensible names.
Peter.
Peter, these are very...
Peter.
Okay, there's a Romanian, no, Hungarian name. Yeah, okay, there we go.
Rosemary.
Rosemary, okay, so they tend to be the kind of old-fashioned names that everyone in Shoreditch calls their kids. Okay, so about half of us could name one. How many people could name all 8 of their great-grandparents? Do you have in Hungary, is it kind of name? Your grandma, I guess, given the age you mostly are, your grandma was probably being born during the Second World War. Is that about right? Grandma was being born then, that's pretty recently, in the 1940s. Your grandma was being born, and the 2 people giving birth to her, I wasn't one person, I work medically, her parents, do you even know their first names? The people who your grandma is their kids. I can't do that. And yet, it was so recently, and they did the right thing, didn't they? Well, what's immortality for most people? It's have kids, and that's success, you've done it, your life is valuable, they'll take your name on. If you can't remember your great-grandma's name, what were they all male names that we had? One. It's interesting, isn't it? Oh, sorry, that was a female name. I just don't know. But it's interesting, isn't it? They did the right things. You are their closest relatives, and you can't even remember their names. Who's going to remember you? Even if you are the super consultant nurse, head of the whatever the doctor thing would be to be head of. Actually, who's going to remember you in 40, 50 years' time? Let me just give you a couple of seconds with your neighbour again. Here's what I'm saying. Your life may not be the same as success. You may be undervaluing your life by thinking life is all about success. Just turn to your neighbour, see what you think of that. In particular, the thing you're living for, is it death-proof? My question, is it death-proof? Will it still have value once you're dead? Is that okay? So with your neighbour, 2 or 3 minutes on that one.
Like almost remember for life before this was still.
Okay, so can I bring you back again?
Yeah.
I'd say we probably won't get feedback on that, but really interesting discussions, I think, beginning there. Let me give you the second thing Jesus says, which is a bit more cheerful, and then we'll have questions afterwards so we can talk about whatever else you'd like to keep talking about. So second point is out of verse 21. First point was your life doesn't consist in your success. That's not what life is. Second point, verse 21, true life is being rich towards God. So Jesus calls him a fool because he's going to get all his barns full of turnips. Then verse 21, this is how it will be with whoever stores up things for themselves but is not rich towards God. And again, because the story's a money one, let me run it with the money example, but I think this would work in lots of other areas. I think it's particularly obvious with money, even though lots of us make a mistake. So money is not a bad thing. Money is a good thing. The Bible's not anti-money. The Bible calls money a blessing, calls it a gift from God, says it's useful, says it's a protection from harm. Okay, money is a good thing. But the Bible also says money is a really bad God. Money makes a really bad God. And I think loads of our success categories, you could say the same thing. Even friends and relationships. So what do you want from a God? Well, so money, for instance, doesn't really care about you. Doesn't know who you are. Can't see you or hear you. And money is powerless on the really important things. Money cannot make you happy. There have been loads and loads and loads of studies demonstrating that. And money can't prevent you dying. Back to what we were saying in the point one. So money is powerless. But I think you can actually do the same thing with friends. So friends can see you, and do hear you, and do care about you if you've got good friends, if you have nice friends. But the same thing, if you try and make them ultimate, try and make them what life is all about, you'll actually always be disappointed, and you'll probably ruin your friendships. So for instance, your friends will never care about you as much as you care about yourself. The Jesus ethic, do to others, do to your neighbour as you would want to be done to you. I don't live that way with my friends because I care about myself more than I care about them. That's human nature. And actually, if you keep looking to friends to care about you, validate your life, love you as much as you want to be loved, as much as you feel you should be loved, you are always going to be let down by your friends, and you are going to put such enormous pressure on them that in the end it's going to break the friendships. And friends as well are powerless on the really important things. They can't actually make you happy. They can't actually protect you from the normal rubbish of life, and they cannot stop you dying. And over the years I've talked with boyfriends, girlfriends, husbands, wives, now the age I've got 2 people and their kids, and you just think you are putting this unfair pressure on the other person to be your God. Your children, your husband, wife, cannot make your life worth something. They can be wonderful friends to be with you in the journey and go with you, but they cannot be God, and actually that breaks friendships. And effectively, I've seen friends kind of split up their relationships on, you have failed to make my life significant and worthwhile. And you think, well, we could have saved you the effort. Yeah, they were never going to do that for you. And you've hurt the friendship by putting that pressure on them. And our guy in the story, his problem basically is that he thinks he is God. He has no idea that his life could be demanded from him. And I think the way Jesus tells the story brings that out. Verse 17, this man, he thinks to himself. I guess that is the main person he talks to about everything. He says, what shall I do? I have no place to store my crops, they're his. Then he said, this is what I will do. I will tear down my barns. I will store my surplus grain. I will say to myself, you've got plenty of grain laid up for many years. Take life easy. Eat, drink, and be merry. And then God said to him, you fool, this very night your life will be demanded from you. There's Jesus' central claim, is that your life is not yours at all. And there's a shocking claim. Doesn't that redefine what success might be? Even our title, how does God fit into my success? Assumes small little God fitting into big important me. and my success. Now I understand we wrote that title. You may not think you agree with it, but I think that is what loads and loads and loads of my friends do. I'm willing to have a little bit of God if a little bit of God would fit into me and what I'm all about. Whereas actually Jesus would say that's the wrong way around. You are created by God, and actually you are part of the abundance of his possessions. Isn't that a humbling way to think about it? You're actually one turnip in the bun in terms of God's point of view. You're something he made and he owns. And in the 21st century, self is everything and success is possible for everybody. Isn't that the kind of thing we're sold at school? You're everything and you will be successful if you want to be. And the trouble is, neither thing is really true. And you're not everything, and you keep bumping into other people who think they're everything as well, and that leads to all sorts of kind of crazy smash-ups. And also success isn't possible for everybody. One of you might be top of the year this year, but all of you won't be. And over a lifetime that is disappointed, selfish fantasy. Whereas what Jesus wants for you is an indestructible, eternal life in relationship with the one who made you. There's the tragedy. God doesn't really think you're eternal at all. God thinks you are far more valuable than you think you are. There's on the cover of the John's Gospels, there's a sheep, because in the middle of John's Gospel, Jesus says, my sheep, my people, hear my voice, and I know them by name, each one. And God thinks you are enormously valuable to him, more valuable than just because you've got friends or good degrees or success. Valuable because you're you. He sees you, he hears you, he cares about you enough to die for you. He can even, happy maybe is the wrong word, but walk with you through suffering and hard times. And he can make you live forever. That's the claim. So here's what I want to suggest just before we go for questions. Suggest that true life, true success, and we were talking in our group about how do you even tell what success should be. Here's a definition according to Jesus. True life is mostly to do with what happens after you die. It's to do with your relationship, not with your friends. Well, friends is in the right category, but relationship with your Creator, the one who made you and knows you. And that true life is being rich towards God in a way that never, ever, ever ends. And I want to suggest it's worth you finding out whether that is true or not. And what we're recommending through this week is that you take time either the John's Gospel here or this one, which is the same thing with a blue cover. And the other thing the blue cover brings with it is some suggested discussion questions on John's Gospel. Jesus claims to be God in person, come to tell you how to have real life. And I think it would be more valuable than anything else you might do this term, would be to read through John's Gospel, maybe with a friend, maybe use the discussion questions, try and work out if Jesus is right when he talks about that. Okay, so life isn't your success, life is rich towards God. I'm going to finish there. I'm going to hand back over to Ethan, who's going to tell us about questions.
Okay, great. So if you've got some questions, write them down on one of these, and I'll come in and we'll put it on.
Oh yeah, great, yeah, do it.
Cool, thank you for the questions. I'll have a go at working through the ones that we handed in quite quickly, and then if you want to come back on them or stick your hand up and ask other ones, that'd be great. Why do we care if our name or worldly success is remembered after our death? Yeah, great question. Sorry. Thank you. Great. Because in a sense we shouldn't. Certainly from a materialist, secular point of view, we just shouldn't care. In the same way, actually, we shouldn't really care if people are horrible to us. We should be able to kind of shrug that off. And the Bible's answer would be that he has put eternity in our hearts. It's a quote from, the Bible's actually very realistic about the bother of life and the disappointments of life. And says actually lots of life tells us this is a lot of effort for nothing, and yet in our hearts is this idea that we're eternal. And God has put eternity in our hearts, and we're frustrated until we achieve that in relationship with him. So I think it's because you are not just a bundle of atoms. You're not just an evolutionary mistake. You're not just consciousness number 6,000,000,003 on the planet. You're something of eternal value. And everything about you cries out against the fact that our world just makes us cans of beans on a conveyor belt heading towards a grave. And we know we're more than that, but it only makes sense that we're more than that in relationship to the one who made us, our Creator. And again, as I get older, someone gave me the Ladybird book, The Midlife Crisis. Have you seen those kind of? Someone gave me that because I've hit that age. And it is, you see people, their heart tells them they should be eternally valuable. They've poured their life into being the best lawyer, doctor, most caring mother, most caring nurse, whatever, the thing they're trying to be, most creative artist, and they hit 40 and they think that hasn't done it. This is without God to anchor the thing you're living for, that hasn't done it. So I think I'd say the reason why is because God's made you that way, deliberately dissatisfied until you find your satisfaction in Him. And I've been interested talking to atheists over the years. How do you explain it if we're not valuable? And then three questions I want to take together. Two of them are the same. What does it mean to be rich towards God? And what is success for you? And I think to say, I try to make success for me the same thing as being rich towards God. To be honest, a lot of the time I'm the same as everybody else. Success means people like me, people think well of me, whatever it is, the whole normal things. But I think Jesus is pointing towards something more satisfying than that. So he ends up, verse 21, saying, the non-foolish thing to do is to be rich towards God. And what I've not put on the sheets for you is the next section is then a discussion about anxiety. I think it's interesting those two things go together. We are the most materialistic culture, arguably, there's ever been, and also the most anxious culture there's ever been. We're the most successful in terms of, grades keep going up, achievement keeps going up, and yet so does anxiety and all its clinical consequences. And Jesus ends the anxiety discussion by saying, seek God's kingdom and everything else will be added to you. And he talks about hunger and clothes and money. You could add in results and popularity and success. And he says, everybody seeks after these things, and your Father, God, knows that you need them. So I think being rich towards God is to recalibrate your life towards a relationship with God. He's my Father, my loving Father who cares for me. He knows what I need. He knows I need food and need a certain amount of friends to stop me going mad. But actually what matters